Hello and welcome to the next of our recaps. This is a recap on corporate governance. So the key concepts when it comes to corporate governance is that it is a system of business governance to try and make the business run more smoothly. So there are different types of codes that can be applied. There are principles-based codes and there are prescriptive-based codes. Remember that corporate governance really is a response to corporate failures such as Enron and WorldCom. So what we want to do is try to enforce corporate governance upon different organisations. That will create stable investments and ensure that corporate reporting standards are upheld. So when it comes to the UK Corporate Governance Code is made up of several reports that have been carried out over the number of years. In 1992, the Cadbury report set out the split of the CEO and chairman. So the chief executive officer and the chairman shouldn't be the same person. Also, it talked about communication with the shareholders and disclosure elements. It also introduced comply or explain, i.e. you should comply with the corporate governance requirements or explain why you haven't done so. And you should really only be explaining very rarely. So it isn't a case that you can just explain away everything. Then in 1995 we had the Greenberry report, which looked really at directors' pay. The Turnbull report in 1998 focused on internal controls and the responsibility of the directors for internal controls. Hampel in 1998 brought together all of the other reports that there had been so far. Lastly, in 2003 we had Higgs, Tyson and Smith, and they focused on the auditors and non-executive directors. So all of these reports were brought together by Hampel in 1998 to form the combined code. The Walker report in 2010 then looked at the combined code to see if it was working, and it said that it was fit for purpose and it reinforced the principles and added a couple more in there. So the UK code is now called the UK Corporate Governance Code, not the combined code as it used to be. There are some problems with corporate governance codes. They will create additional bureaucracy, which is a problem. It is one size for all organisations, so everyone has to implement the same rules and regulations. And it tends to react rather than foresee problems. So it reacts to problems as they come up and maybe comes in with a new principle or a new rule rather than trying to foresee problems and deal with them in that way before that they actually happened. Remember, any rules can be circumvented and it does reduce risk taking in organisations, and if we reduce the risk that organisations are taking, well then we potentially reduce the rewards as well. So the contents of the Corporate Governance Code, and we'll look at each of these in detail, we just want to get an overview at this point, is that Section A focuses on leadership within the organisation. So that looks at board responsibility, the split of the board and the role of the board, all of which we will then look at in detail. Section B is the effectiveness of the code, thinking about the skills of the board, the nomination committee, the induction process and performance assessment of the board. Section C focuses on accountability, thinking about internal controls and the board's responsibility for them, and the board's responsibility to give a balanced assessment on how the business has performed. Section D talks about remuneration and how it should be transparent and disclosed, and Section E looks at shareholder relations, particularly focusing on dialogue with shareholders and communication with the shareholders. So that's our introduction to the Corporate Governance Code, the UK Code as it's now called. We're going to go on now to look at each of those sections in detail.